well, guys, thank you very much for attending our South African PR landscape report this year. We've started doing this measurement. It started off as a little bit of a mini conference in 2014, and we had a huge amount of people. It ended up being 5 people. So it's really, really cool how it's grown since 2014. We've now got I don't know how many are on board at the moment, but I mean over 300 people applied to join us on this webinar. So it's really cool to see the evolution over the years since 2014 to now. Firstly, I want to thank Relay and Jess, who've put on a hell of a lot of work to get this thing going up until now, through the headaches, through technology and all the rest of it. So guys, that's really cool. Asim, who's the chairman of AMEC, thank you very much for joining us. Asim, I know Jonah joined us last year. It was really cool to have her as well. And I think it's important to have Asim in that, seeing it from an international perspective, what AMEC has done. I mean, AMEC is the Barcelona principle. So, it would be a shame not to have AMEC on this. So it's really cool to have you, Asim, and thank you for agreeing to be with us. And really, November is measurement month, and the measurement month came from AMEC. So that's why we've handled doing this during this period. Mona, Warwick, Tebogo, thank you very much. And it's really cool to have your perspective from a brand perspective, from an agency perspective, from a media perspective. It's really cool to see the different perspectives around measurement. And Dr. Tersha, I know I use your first name, but thank you very much for being our partner on this and utilizing your survey around this. So it's really cool. Now we're going to have it this year, and we can now have a longitudinal study and see how perceptions, behaviors have kind of changed in the South African market over the last the next couple of years. So it'll be really interesting to
over the next decade, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be really cool. Yeah. And also, I just need to I got to mention Francois, who's been on the measurement committee on the IAB, as well as on AMEC. I mean, he's actually worked on the Barcelona principles, on the videos, etc. So, and I'll just talk about the foundation course that is available to a lot of people on the AMEC. But I'm sure, Asim, you'll kind of bring that up. But and just to say that, just blow our own trumpet from an Ornico perspective, is that Ornico is the only full member of AMEC in Africa. So it's really, really cool to do that. So a little bit of self pushing as well. So that's cool. Guys, let me quickly introduce. So as I said, I've said to you who Asim is. Mona Lisa is founder of the Riverbed Agency. What's really cool to have Mona here is that she looks at it from both perspectives. A creative agency, she started off from PR. It's the convergence of the communication, and I think that's really cool. Tebogo, the CEO of the Sheikho Media, but also was a chairman of and is chairman of Prisa, and Warwick, who've worked with for a long, long time at Hollard. So thank you really very much for actually joining us. Guys, I think let's get started, because this is really interesting and I don't want to waste time. So we'll start off with Tersha. She'll go through some of the results of the survey, and thanks to all the respondents who actually responded to the survey. So Tersha, do you want to take us through the survey, and then we can start debating it, talking about it. And guys, when you have questions, just please drop us a line in those questions, drop it in the comments. I will get a WhatsApp or something from my team, and I'll ask the questions to the team, to the participants here. So please drop any comments that you have. Tersha, the floor is all yours.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Arisi. So first off, I just want to thank everybody that came here for this panel today. It is the start of something that is so exciting, to truly take the measurement and evaluation practices of Africa as a whole, not just South Africa, into account, and putting that into a global perspective, not only this year, but in the years coming, is a very exciting thing. So I'm going to jump right into the data, because as I've mentioned earlier to Oresti, it's not every day that somebody wants to hear you be a nerd about statistics. So this is the fun part of my day. I just quickly want to give a brief overview of how we actually approached this research. I don't know if anybody in this panel saw the report beforehand, but just for everybody's sake, let's coordinate. We looked at this from more or less 5 angles. Okay, so we started with demographics and looking at what the practice looks like first. And then we want to place that practice and what it looks like into the context of measurement evaluation. And that gives us a lovely, well-rounded perspective on measurement evaluation. So we looked at demographics of our practitioners. We looked at the roles that practitioners are currently reporting that they're fulfilling in their organizations. Then we looked at the actual measurement evaluation practices. We looked at the measurement maturity of their practices. I'm sure Ahmed will find this very interesting because of all the work they've been doing to promote measurement maturity. And lastly, of course, you can't talk about measurement evaluation if you're not talking about how we are reporting on that as well. So those are the 5 dimensions of which we looked at this thing. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen and present you with the actual report. Like that. Okay, these are our 5 dimensions that we looked at. Practitioner and practice demographics, the roles of the practitioners, our actual measurement evaluation practices, maturity, and then the reporting of that. We saw some very interesting stuff coming out of here. First off, the PR industry as a whole when it comes to practitioners are nice and spread out across all age groups. Okay, we have very young people coming in working in the industry. We have older people not leaving the industry, and the majority just lies all across the spectrum, which is really good because it brings us all of these different perspectives to our industry. And of course, very exciting in South Africa, we're seeing a female-dominated industry. I love seeing that. So we asked the practitioners, what is a type of occupation in public relations? And we see the vast majority in communications agencies, with a second largest part being in-house practitioners. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on. But as far as South African practice goes in this place, it's very much agency dominated, but the in-house practitioners and the freelancers are really holding up their own. So in line with that, we can see that most PR departments are considered very small. And these are PR departments, whether it's part of an agency or in-house, vast majority is between 1 and 5 people. And then we see the very larger groups coming in as agencies, of course. So this is where it gets really interesting. And this is where it bodes well for measurement evaluation. Okay, our practitioners in South Africa are 40%. I reported that they are reporting directly to senior management, CEO, president, MD. Okay, largest part to marketing as it has always been, but this is very exciting to see the PR practitioners getting that seat at the table and reporting directly to top management. And then, of course, if they are reporting to top management, we also see one of the highest figures I've seen yet in South African studies of PR practitioners being included in strategic decisions and strategic sessions and in meetings where strategic directions are being determined. So nearly 30% strongly agree with us, nearly 22% really agrees with us. And then we get those that say, sometimes, sometimes not, but still this makes up the vast majority. And that is just very encouraging for the PR profession as a whole going forward. And next we looked at the role. So this is a second dimension that we tackled for this. We looked at the role of the practitioner. This gets a bit interesting. So theoretically, we've defined 3 roles in practice. And how they define these roles were by asking PR practitioners, literally, what do you do every day? And then they took all of those reported activities that people do and they grouped them into a technical function. Technical function would be your lower level employees or your junior employees who are hitting the buttons, who are executing on plans. So that's an execution level focused role. Secondly, we have the managerial role. Those are the people that make sure all of the efforts are coordinated, the stuff goes out on time, the budgets are making sense, and the highest role that we have in literature is defined as a strategist role, and that is the person that sits with the top level management and determines the strategic alignment between the company's or the organization's goals and the goals of the communication function. Okay, super important and very interesting at this point to remember that in South Africa, there had actually been an additional niche role found in literature, and that is a role of a cultural interpreter. So, very often, South African practitioners would say we do all of these things, but we also fulfill a strong role that relates to relationship management and translating messages across cultural boundaries. So, that's always a fun thing for South Africans. To take head on, and the cultural interpretation role is not found anywhere else in the world. So that is something that is very niche to our profession and very important to bear in mind, because it's also it's highly strategic when you have to fulfill that kind of function. Right. So we looked at the technical managerial and strategist role, and what we have found is what literature up to this point have always found. South Africans are unfortunately doing all three. A single practitioner would always report that they are doing technical work, doing managerial work, and also doing strategic work. We can see in this case, the largest part is still functioning on a technical role. Then we have a big percentage reporting their managerial role, but then again, the highest yet reported function of a strategic role. And this is so exciting, because it means that for the first time in South Africa, the PR profession is really grabbing onto that strategic role and moving into it stronger than ever. And as we'll see later on, a strategic role is going to enable and unlock good and strong measurement and evaluation. So that's very cool. Unfortunately, South African practice has not been granular to the extent where European practice is, for example, but they are still fulfilling all three roles. But it's great to see the highest number yet reporting that they are fulfilling a strategic role. Right. I'm going to jump through this, which everybody can read afterwards. So our third dimension for looking at measurement and evaluation in our practice is the actual practice. And we started this by asking about the Barcelona principles. Happy to report the awareness among South African practitioners of the Barcelona principles is at its highest yet. So that is incredible. We have almost 60% awareness. So that is really happy news for everybody. And I have to also make a special mention to Ornico here. Ornico has been instrumental in leading the drive for awareness of the Barcelona principles in our practice. And I truly believe them with other advocates have made this happen. So we see strong awareness amongst practitioners working in communication agencies, but also very strong awareness amongst in-house practitioners, right? But then unfortunately, we see the lowest implementation of the Barcelona principles also by agencies. And this is a call to agencies to really bring that Barcelona principles into your practice and make it part of the formal measurement evaluation process in an agency. This statistic also gives us a lovely idea of how formalized measurement evaluation is happening in our practice, where in-house practitioners, relatively formalized, not that bad, but in communication agencies, very high reporting that they actually have a formal process to follow. Of course, it relates to standardization, and the Barcelona principles will only help them further this and make their formal processes so much stronger. No surprise that South Africans are experiencing budget constraints even in PR measurement and evaluation. As always, this remains the largest challenge to measurement and evaluation, but we also see some very interesting other things popping up. The lack of research skills in the team. Remember that the South African practice typically consists of very small teams, so it's understandable that those smaller teams are lacking research skills to conduct more empirical and more interpretive research. Gaining support from management also features measuring the success of activities is a challenge for people, and then proving the value of your activities to management also features their reporting to management on the value of PR. We'll revisit that in our last dimension. And we also see resource restraints, which relates to budget constraints. But this is where practitioners are reporting that they lack access to tools, platforms, software, team members, etc., to properly execute on their measurement and evaluation. Right, so our next dimension, sorry, is where we look at the measurement maturity. And when it comes to measurement maturity, we typically want to check on what level are you measuring the success of your efforts. So it's output level, outtake level, and outcome measurement levels, of course. Output level is highly technical. This typically correlates very strongly to the technical role of the practitioner as well. And we see a 40 plus a 30% agreement, so that gives us around a 70% agreement that they are measuring at output level. Happily, plenty of people are measuring at outtake level as well. So that's where you're going to measure, is there retention of messages, or is there understanding of the messages, not just that they get the message. And outcome level measurement, of course, is our highest level of measurement. And these figures are just fabulous to see in our practice. So many people are actually looking at, are there behavioral changes, are there changes in attitudes and opinions. They're not just focusing on those impressions and likes. They are actually looking for meaning in their outtake level measurement and putting that into outcome level measurement. So that is heartwarming to see. In addition to that, we can see that quite a lot of practitioners are actually measuring tone and sentiment, all right, which is awesome. They're not just measuring media placements, but they're also interpreting that message and taking their measurement a bit further. And this as a whole places our measurement maturity again at one of the highest levels that we have yet seen in South African practice, which is fabulous. We have to ask the question, did the pandemic influence this? Especially when it comes to outcome level measurement. The pandemic made it easier for people to see changes in behaviors and to measure those changes in attitudes, opinions, and actual behavior. And I think this really pushed our industry forward as a whole. The specific part of the data is concerning. The question we ask is, my PR department or agency measures social media consistently with other media channels. I'm happy that plenty of people are saying yes, but I'm very scared that plenty of practitioners are disagreeing with this statement. They don't set clear goals for social media platforms, and they don't measure it consistently with other platforms. That is a bit concerning. Social media, and Lisa will tell us more about that later. Social media has to be integrated into the rest of the communication strategy. We cannot be executing with social media and expecting to get clear and valuable measurement and evaluation if we're not setting clear goals for these platforms and if we're not integrating that into our entire strategy. So we do see that, again, plenty of practitioners are measuring social media conversions, the engagement, and the conversation, as well as their coverage metrics like likes and reach. So that's fine, but it's still a bit concerning that social media is almost seen as different from the rest of the media execution. And then our last one, we're going to have a quick look at AVEs. Of course, unfortunately, we're still seeing a very high prevalence of AVEs. So the majority of practitioners in our country are still using AVEs, but it's getting lower and lower. Previous years' data have always reported AVEs to be as high as 93%. It averages out in about 72%. And then this year in this research, we got around average 60%, which is lower than ever. And just fantastic news. And then we also see that practitioners are reporting on their return on investment, which is fabulous. We've seen amongst the challenges that practitioners are experiencing that proving their return on investment for PR activities is a challenge that they experience, but we can also see a lot of practitioners getting this right. So if you look at a couple of key points that we can take away from this, overall, looking at awareness of the Barcelona principles, the measurement maturity that we're seeing, the increase in strategic coherence, and the strategic inclination that we're seeing in inclusion in the practice, measurement and evaluation is at an all-time high for the South African industry, which is excellent. The fact that at the very beginning, amongst the demographic data, practitioners reported that they are reporting to higher lines, they are reporting directly to top management. We can see that also creating more strategic roles for PR. So the one is going to feed the other. There's a process of unlocking that seat at the table for PR professionals, and that's a very positive thing for the entire industry as a whole. Definite increase in measurement maturity, almost inevitable if we consider the fact that there's strategic involvement and their strategic roles are increasing and becoming more prevalent. Then, of course, there's going to be an increase in their measurement maturity. AVEs are still walking amongst us, and we are happy that that figure is going down in our practice for the first time in a couple of years. And then the practice demographics of this research highlights the importance for agencies to upskill their workforce in strategic measurement evaluation practices. And this is where I really want to I'm going to stop sharing right here, move back. This is where I want to put a call out to agencies to not only focus on the account leads and the top people on accounts to have that seat at the boardroom table of their clients, but to involve their technical practitioners in more strategic activities and to involve them in in a more strategic execution of activities to later unlock that measurement evaluation. If we see immature practice and poor technical execution, then we're going to measure and evaluate. So I think that for the next couple of years, the focus for measurement evaluation and to really to make it a priority in the industry is going to start with the technical practitioners, the people pushing the buttons. If we can educate them, our next couple of years should paint a very different picture. Arresti, what
Cool. Cool, Tertia, thank you very much. I think coming from an academic perspective, it's really cool to see it. I mean, we come, most of us, all of us, the rest of us are really looking at it from a practical perspective. And I think that's what we need to delve in now, is how do we take this academic stuff and put it really into practice, because I think that's important.
Yes.
One of the interesting things, the fact that we handle all three levels means that us as South Africans, we're very hardworking. We do everything. We kind of, so we can't take that away from us. I also think, awareness, some of my experiences, and it's very, it's not from a research perspective, but really, awareness of Barcelona principles doesn't necessarily mean it really translates into actual measurement. And we need to be very aware of that. So the fact that we're aware of Barcelona principles is cool, is how do we evolve it into actual measurement, and which follows on to the next slide about budget. I understand that budget does sometimes hinder, but there's stages, and I'm sure Asim will kind of revolve around that. I mean, there are stages of this measurement. You don't have to go full bang shoot. There's certain things that are kind of quite simple to ultimately do without really costing that much more money. So it's just really getting people to understand how do we evolve into a step-by-step approach into this. So it's maybe a bit of a lack of understanding. One of the interesting things I heard from a practitioner is, and I know AVEs are still important, and we will always report AVEs in all our presentations anyway. But the interesting thing I saw one was an AMEC approved AVE system. Now, I mean, now that's crazy. I promise you. I thought, where did you get that from? But so sometimes there's misconceptions in the industry that we really need to try and also disempower at the end of the day. And return on investment, again, return on investment has different perceptions to different people. Return on investment could be an AVE to some people. And that's a critical thing that we also need to dispel. What is return on investment, and how do we determine what that return on investment is? So, Tertia, just as that, thank you very much. Asim, from your perspective, I mean, you're looking at it specifically, coming from India, I'm sure from an Indian perspective, you're having a lot of the same issues as we do in South Africa, I'm sure. So I'd like to see the similarities, and if you can just talk about some of those similarities. But being the chairman of a global organization, if you can just talk to us about the global evolution of this measurement, and then we can kind of have a discussion around that.
Thank you, Rusty, and thank you, Tertia. That was very interesting survey results. And as Oresti mentioned, at AMIC, we look at many countries across the world. And what we've done is we've divided the entire world into regions. So what we notice is that the maturity levels of companies and practitioners of public relations in different regions is very, very different. In Europe, we would notice that the maturity levels are much much higher as compared to, say, let's say Latin America or Africa or even parts of Asia Pacific. And uh, we've seen that there is a high correlation between people complaining about budgets and usage of AVEs. There's a very high correlation. So those markets wherein people are complaining that we do not get budgets from our senior management, they're actually using more of advertising value equivalents. And you know, it's very interesting that the reason for them not getting the budgets is actually that they are using AVEs. Because if you're using an invalid metric to show the value of the work that you're doing for the organization, this is what happens. Because most of the people don't even understand on the business side what is the value of that AVE. In fact, I remember our earlier chair, his name is Richard Bagnall, and he was presenting something, and he showed a number on the screen, and the number ran into trillions. And he said, this is the AVE that Microsoft created in the last 2 months. And if I were to show this number to the CEO of Microsoft, he would say, forget everything else. Just get me this money. You know, if you just get me this money, then we are sorted, because the number is so high. So AVs clearly do not have any use in public relations work. And typically, when we start working with new companies, new members, and we promote and we tell them that we should stop using AVs, they say, where do we start? And that's where we've also created a guide which says, here are the 23 reasons why you should stop using AVEs. And how do you start that conversation with the customer? How do you share with the customer that we're going to stop using AVEs? Because not only do you have to tell them that AVs are bad, you also need to give an alternate. And that's where AMEC has been investing in educating our partners, educating our customers, and we've also been investing in creating new knowledge using which you can showcase the value of public relations.
So thanks, Asim. I think not getting budgets, you're right. I think the PR industry, though, is really a much, if you go back, I mean, we started in the industry 40 years ago. I think the PR industry is really much more of a strategic industry now than it has been for many, many years at the end of the day. And it really plays a very, very important role in perceptions, in positioning a particular brand. So getting those budgets for the communication departments and the industry is absolutely critical. So I think it's important that the value is ultimately shown. But I also think people, and I don't know what you feel internationally, but people's KPIs are aligned to AVEs. So it's very difficult for people to actually say, no, I don't want the AVE because my KPIs are aligned to it. So what do you say? What do you say around that, and how do we handle that?
We have also had this challenge in our country, wherein there are organizations wherein the KPIs are aligned to AVEs. It has taken time, and I'm not even suggesting that we've converted every organization to move away from that. But yes, we have made significant progress. But the most important element here is that change will only start once you start talking to the leaders in the organization with the right metrics, or you help them understand how your public relations objectives are aligned with the business objectives that the seniors or the leadership has given to you. And I think this is actually the toughest part of any measurement journey. How do you convert the business objective into your communication objectives and do it in a smart manner so that it's measurable? And I can tell you there are a number of reasons why PR practitioners fail on this aspect. At times they don't know the right tools, or they are not able to assess and convert the business objectives into measurement objectives. At times they are lazy, they just don't want to do it. In fact, I was in Dubai recently for the ICCO conference, and I came across a very interesting survey result wherein in the last 12 to 24 months, even ICCO saw suddenly that there was an increase, a slight increase in usage of AVEs across the world. And I was asked why, what could be the reason? And I can only think of 2 3 reasons why this could be the case. Because last 2 years have been very difficult for most businesses. People have been busy fighting fires everywhere, and as a result, again, the focus has moved away from defining your objectives better. People are just running and doing stuff and not thinking about the right thing that they should be investing their time in. The other thing also is that good measurement also enables the leadership to make you accountable for what you have signed up for. And this is also something that we have seen act as uh, inhibitant, that people are scared that I don't want my work to be so transparent to the leadership. And at times people get scared and say, let me not do this. I am comfortable showing AVs to my boss. He has never asked me about it. If I start showing something so transparent to my boss, I may get into trouble. And we have seen this concern also come up in certain cases. But overall, I can tell you, whatever research we've done, people who have moved away from AVs are able to have more strategic role and conversations with their leadership.
Okay, thanks, Seaman. I think this is the right time to come to you, Ornico. I think the evolution moving from solely AVEs to much more of a measurement reporting. Where have you found the difficulties, the challenges, etc.? Because I seem, I did talk about those challenges, and I know that a lot of organizations are going through exactly what Asim ultimately spoke about. So if you could just tell us about the journey.
So thanks, Oresti. I mean, as a relative newcomer to the industry, I've only been in PR for about 10 years now. And what has struck me is the almost universal disdain for AVEs. And yet, in every award ceremony, from every agency, in every environment in which I operate, AVEs are the go-to measure. And I think that the issue is around, it's the same problem we face with sugar and diets. AVEs are like sugar. They're easily accessible. They give you a quick fix and you can move on. This campaign scored this AVE, and therefore for every rand I spent, it was worth it. And so I think there's an unacknowledged attraction for AVEs, despite the fact that every single bit of theory that I've seen emerge over the last 10 years has dismissed AVEs. I think we need to ask, why are they still so sticky? And I think it's to do with the speed with which they're accessible, but also their portability. So I know if I get an AVE from company A, and then I then switch to measurement tool B, I'm going to get something similar. I'm going to get something comparable. And what AVEs did was they provided something that was relatively portable. As soon as you go to a bespoke measurement, which my reading of the Barcelona principles suggests you should, you then have the problem of portability across measurement tools. You have portability across agencies. You have an historical issue in trying to compare what your historical performance was on those measures versus what they are now. So I think there and every award ceremony I see states either an AVE or a PR equivalent, and that's just the way it is. And I think it's because it's quick and easy and lazy too. Asim's point about people running around, I think maybe you even saw it in the stats that Tertia presented around what South African PR practitioners are expected to do. They're expected to operate across those three levels and then potentially play the cultural role as well. Because there's no time, there's not enough time and effort spent in developing those bespoke measurements, despite the fact that they are strategically sound. The only strategically sound way to operate in this environment, for me, is to follow the Barcelona principles, to set your objectives up front, to develop the tools to measure those objectives, and then to report back on that. What happens is that you resort to a money measure, and that's the other attraction of AVEs, is that you can divide your AVE by your cost, and then you've got an ROI. That's easily done. It's much harder to convert other measures into monetary values, and so I think we're getting there. I mean, I certainly sense a growing appetite both amongst agencies and in-house practitioners to follow a more strategic approach. We saw that in Tertia's stats that there's an appetite for it, but I think the how is still lacking, and I think some good work needs to be done to create something that is as rewarding from a dopamine hit perspective as AVEs are, but that is much more nutritious. So I think that's the challenge for the industry and for practitioners.
I think you're right in terms of that, Warwick. And I'm really glad to have Mona here because she looks at it both from a creative perspective and a PR perspective. And I think that's what's cool about the Barcelona principle is it's platform agnostic. So you can actually measure it across advertising or PR or whatever. Mona, from an agency perspective, Warwick has given us much more from a brand perspective. How are you finding the evolution? What are the issues that you're finding moving across it, specifically from your clients as well? And how do you go about it? Sorry, you're on mute, Mona.
Sorry about that. Well, thanks for the question. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's always good at least to just look at the landscape and the context, right? I know the Barcelona principles have been around since 2010, if I'm not mistaken, but the reality is our landscape continues to change. And I think that's a global phenomenon. We know that our print platforms are shrinking every day. We know that traditional media is no longer the gatekeeper of news. You've got a Joe Rogan who's got 20 million people listening to his show every day versus a CNN, which has numbers that are less than 1 million. So, our PR landscape continues to change. And I think when we look at the, measurement tools and how we measure PR, we also need to look at how that evolves in the context of this ever-changing landscape. I think that's really the first thing for me. And as I'd said earlier, before we went live, the reality is also that there's this convergence of traditional PR, social media, digital, etc. So when we look at measurement, it really has to be in the context of understanding this dynamic. Over and above that, at least, in terms of the work we do, PR doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's always really part of a bigger integrated campaign. In addition to that, a lot of our PR budgets are sitting within an overarching marketing budget. So when we're reporting on that, we need to be able to do so first and foremost, I think, in a way that marketing will understand the value of PR. And we know that marketing metrics a lot of times are sitting within awareness, consideration, if we look at that funnel, conversion, sales. And so how does PR begin, at least from a measurement perspective, how does PR begin to deliver on some of those metrics? And, so with this crossover, as you were saying, RSD, that because we dabble between the creative side and look at earned PR as part of an amplification of an integrated marketing campaign, those become the metrics that we start to look at. And interestingly, I know there's quite a bit of disdain for AVEs, but if we know for sure that within a integrated campaign, media takes the lion's share of that budget, AVEs suddenly become something marketers would want to look at because it's showing some return on what possibly could be a media budget spend. So, I'm in agreement that it definitely can't be the only, metric that should be looked at. And we should be looking at other metrics based on the Barcelona principles and even beyond that, to ensure that first and foremost, we're seeing the value of PR, both, when looking at PR from a traditional perspective, but also when we view it within a more integrated campaign or campaigns. So, I think in closing, really, first and foremost, and Warwick, I think you mentioned this, that we really need to be setting our KPIs, smart objectives, etc., up front, so we're clear about what we're measuring, and then obviously ensuring that we seek to deliver on that. But I do believe, for PR to continue to have a seat on the table, we do need to be able to show value to business and more importantly to marketing, and that's always the battle that we tend to have.
Yeah, I think some interesting points is about the changing landscape. But I think because of the changing landscape, measurement becomes even much more important than the consultation between ourselves, agencies, brands, etc. In what are those objectives because of that changing landscape. But also that PR is not in a silo. There's so many messages that the consumer is ultimately getting from that particular brand. And that's why that convergence becomes so important. And again, measurement, and you're measuring it against those particular messages so that there's not a conflict of those messages. But it does, as Asim, Warwick, yourself, Mona mentioned, it does take work. And she's in this time, time in this industry at the moment is really something that everybody's looking for. And sometimes it does take a little bit of more time to do it.
Right.
Tebogo, do you want to add any bits, because you struggle both from a media perspective as well as from an agency, etc. So do you want to just add some of those points from Mona and from Warwick?
Thank you for having me. I think we need to go back to basics. In my perspective, public relations is completely misunderstood. If you look at the relationship between public relations and advertising, you can advertise as much as you want, but if your relationships with your stakeholders is messed up, it's not going to work. And the essence of public relations is in building relationships with your stakeholders and maintaining them. And if we move beyond that, we then have to understand that it is difficult to demonstrate the value that you're creating. So we are also a part of the value generating aspects of a business. But if we do not demonstrate the value that we are creating in an appropriate fashion, then you can be creating value, but it will go unnoticed. And so I think the first thing that we need to do is understand how do you develop those objectives. So there's the smart objectives, there's random objectives, and there's no objectives. So the smart objectives are measurable, as Tertia has indicated, that they're measurable at an output level, at an uptake level, and at an outcomes level. The random, objectives are not measurable, and they don't have a purpose under it. And so I'll give you an example. You'll find that there's an RFQ that says we want 5 million impressions. Now you'll ask yourself, why do you want 5 million impressions? Let's say, for example, you're trying to get more young customers in South Africa. I can get you 5 million impressions in Poland, and you won't get any new customers from your target audience. And so what is the purpose of your 5 million impressions? And so we need to reorganize our relationships with these organizations, because it is good to see that we're becoming more strategic beyond just being technical. But in that strategy, it should start with the objective. And so the organization needs to advise the public relations specialist, what am I trying to achieve? And it is the public relations specialist that should advise you how you're going to get there. Whether it's a public relations specialist or the marketing specialist, but that specialist needs to tell you, how are you going to get there? It's probably not going to be 5 million impressions. It is probably going to be a strategy in which we will increase the leads as well as the conversions of new clients. And you have some people at an output level who are saying, we need 5 posts to be posted each week. Now you ask yourself, why? Why should there be 5 posts posted each week? Yes, we could do that because maybe you want to remain top of mind, but that is perhaps a means to an end, but it may not be the ends in itself, because what are you posting in those 5 messages? Are you posting things that are random, or do you really understand your target audience in a manner that you are posting things that are leading you towards the objectives that you have set? And so I think it's important for us to take it a step backwards, where the client is focused mainly on what are they trying to achieve, and then the public relations specialist will come up with the strategy, to ensure that they're able to achieve what they achieve. Now, just in closing, I think in terms of your objectives, and we have a lot of young people, we have a lot of upcoming professionals, some people on the line are even students. You have to know what is the difference between a SMART objective and a random objective. A random objective includes saying that we are trying to create a buzz. Now, how do you measure a buzz? Do you take the word bzz and then you just measure it by the seconds in which the buzz is coming? You cannot measure a buzz. You can measure a lead. You would like to get 10,000 leads, and out of those 10,000, you want to convert 500 every single day into clients of this new bank. But a proper objective is that is very specific in terms of the numbers that you're trying to target and exactly what is the behavioral change that you're trying to achieve. And that'll take us back to understanding, behavioral economics and understanding our target audiences. And when we get absolutely sophisticated, like my new thesis that I've just submitted for my MBA, then you can start talking about hypothesis testing and actually going on the field and understanding exactly what was the impact of your campaign.
Sure. Tebogo, thank you for that. I mean, I like the differentiation between random objectives and SMART objectives. I think that's really cool. I've got a question here, but I see you were writing down quite a lot of stuff. So before I go to my next question, which relates to what Tebogo, Mona, and Warwick were talking about, do you want to just tell us what you were vehemently writing there? You're on mute. Asim.
So the first thing I must congratulate you for your region is that the number of 78% saying that they are working on strategic activities while performing their jobs is very, very good in my opinion. So congratulations on that. Second is Tebogo's point about going back to the basics. And this is something that we think about every time we go into a new client situation and we talk about what is it that you're trying to achieve. And Tebogo gave a very easy example and said a random objective of saying we want to create buzz. Instead of that, please define it better. And what we tell our clients and members is ask questions. So when somebody says we want to create buzz, ask them more questions to say, tell us more. Tell us how will it help? And when you start asking these questions again and again, you will be able to work with your client to articulate those objectives better. Now you're mute.
You know, none of us have got used to this. So it follows on from what you just said, Asim. And Warwick, this is a question for you, but I think it's absolutely relevant for all the panelists. Can you please outline the measurement tools available outside AVEs?
So I think I'm going to reference the AMIC framework here. I think there's an excellent document available online. If you look at the Barcelona principles and then you scroll to the AMIC framework, there are a whole host of measurements that are suggested there for a whole bunch of things. I mean, I would be lying if I said we've answered the question, because then I would be presenting the new model for measurement. But to Tebogo's point about setting smart objectives, and those objectives can be set in terms of reach, in terms of share of voice, in terms of sales objectives, in terms of brand attributes, etc., and then can be measured through things like market research, and whether it's dipstick or detailed, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. So there are a whole host of measures. I mean, one of the things that I'm intrigued by at the moment is sentiment, which I think is really, really important, but it's tracked unevenly, because what happens is that you contract with organizations that will measure the sentiment ascribed to your post, but then when it comes to comparing that sentiment against your competitors, that's typically run through an AI engine, and so you're not necessarily comparing like for like. And that goes back to my problem around transportability and portability of these measures between agencies and organizations and measurement tools. But certainly things like sentiment, things like share of voice can be important, depending on, as per Tebogo's point, what you've set out to do. And I think that's actually, if you can summarize the Barcelona principles in one sentence, it's about setting out up front what it is that you are trying to do through your PR intervention, and then measuring that. So, and the AMIC framework, I think, creates a very good idea of the tools that are available, all the different types of measurement that you can use. I saw another question relating to does it cost to sort of change from AVEs? Yes, it does. It costs time and thinking, time and strategizing. You really have to think about this in a very different way if you want to move away from the simplicity of AVEs. And to Mona's point, AVEs might be one of your measures. For example, if you're looking at to what extent you've gained media space for a particular campaign, but it's a small part of the overall measurement. So I think the AMIC framework provides a great starting point. I think things like sentiment, share of voice, type of exposure. So what I mean by that, thought leadership versus editorial versus brand related stuff, all of those measures I think are interesting at this stage. As I say, we haven't yet got to the point where we can say this is exactly how we measure it, but we certainly are moving to a much richer measurement based on what I think are relatively smart objectives.
Can I add to that question?
Yes, I see.
And Mona talked about the marketing funnel, wherein we are moving our stakeholders from a state of awareness and moving them from left to right, from awareness to knowledge to consideration to interest, and finally state of action, wherein they actually buy our service or product. And in the question says, is there any other tool other than AVE that is available? So first, I want to correct that AVE is not a tool; it's just a metric, and we believe it's a flawed metric. And if you were to look at Amec's website, which is www.amecorg.com, in the resources section, you will find we have a lot of frameworks and interactive tools that are available. We started the journey with something which we call valid metrics framework. This framework was created so that we could marry the marketing funnel with the activities that we do as PR professionals. And for each of these objectives, it provides what are the metrics that you can use if you wanted to show the impact of your program. The latest version of this is what we call the integrated evaluation framework. And again, as Mona talked about the changing landscape, the integrated evaluation framework looks at all kinds of mediums. So it could be traditional PR, it could be social media, it could be owned platforms. And what it does is it provides you ideas on what are the various metrics that you can use if you wanted to measure the outputs, if you wanted to measure the outtakes, if you wanted to measure the outcomes. And this is a free tool available, because I saw another question which was about how much will it cost if we were to move away from AVEs. I can promise you that if you go to the Amec website, go to this interactive tool, you don't even have to pay any money. You can start your journey from moving away from AVs to using smarter metrics for free. Where members of Amec come in are that we have experienced professionals who have done this for several years. If you want to learn on your own, please do it on the Amec website. But if you want to do it faster and if you want to create better impact, then please reach out to one of the Amec members and ask them to help you run this framework for your organization.
Thanks. And there's so many questions. There are so many questions kind of coming up, and I can't believe that the time is nearly up, but I have to. This is an important question. And it's for Tebogo, but again, for all of us. What is the difference between hard above the line objectives and PR below the line objectives? And I think, Mona, I think this is also one for you. So, but since it is angled at you, Tebogo, do you want to expand on it? And then Mona, and then we'll have to close it up.
Thank you very much. It would have been nice if it was just for the panel generally, but in terms of a PR objective versus like an advertising objective, a PR objective is context-based. So it's based on your situation. So Eskom would have a completely different PR objective compared to Sanlam, you know. So in that instance, it would be important for us to also get into a strategic role at Eskom in helping them, you know, to shape their reputation, but also managing expectations. So Eskom might want to improve its reputation, you know, amongst South Africans, and that it is moving towards, you know, providing sustainable energy over the next 5 years. And South Africans may not believe that, and so you would then develop a strategy for them to come on board in terms of believing that Eskom does have the capacity to do so. But I think a PR professional also has a responsibility from an integrity perspective, that you should not be promising things that you cannot deliver. So we are not about propaganda and making people believe things that are not the intention of the organization to achieve. You know, so I think that's very important. And in terms of above the line and advertising, their objectives would be very closely knitted around sales. You know, they'd like to achieve this many sales, you know, over this period, and they would be less aligned to what would a PR person would do in terms of building relationships. So all these responses you see of brands responding, you know, to customers on social media, that's more public relations. You know, we're trying to build the relationship, you know, and make sure that the environment is conducive, you know, for the advertising aspect to thrive.
Mona, can you please add? I think this is a very important question to you as well, because you do struggle between the two spaces. If you can just elaborate. Oops. It seems we have...
Sorry, there I am. I think essentially, above the line advertising is around positioning of brands. How do we create distinctive brands in the market? So a lot of money and spend is put towards that. And also, obviously it could be an awareness job and ultimately delivering on sales, as per what Deborah said. For me, PR really is about reputation. So how do we leverage thought leadership, etc., to drive brand or product reputation within the market? But PR also does more and more have a seat at the table within the marketing context. So it can help to support brand positioning in the context of an above the line campaign. And more what we're finding is that even within a marketing brief, there will be a role for PR to play within that. And more and more, even when we look at the measures from an integrated perspective, we are able to measure the value that PR has delivered within that entire, marketing mix.
Yep. Thank you very much, guys. I'm sorry, but we've kind of run out of time, and there are so many questions in the comments section. But I think just to thank the panel, Tertia, number one, for your research, and that we're going to now have a longitudinal survey, which was really be cool. Asim, thank you for spending the time with us. And I can see, those of you want some of those frameworks and tools. If you're just going to amec.com. There we go. There's some free tools there. But special thank you to Mona, to Bocho and Warwick. Really, thank you for your time. I know you guys are really, really hectically busy. I think an important thing, yes, it does need work to actually shift it a little bit at the end of the day. So guys, just get hold of us at Ornico. We set up a workshop, interrogate it and see how do we shift slowly and take stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 in terms of the measurement journey. But once again, thank you everybody for filling out the form. Thanks to the team. You've been rock stars, and I can't believe that the time went this quickly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Okay, everybody else go.